I'm Mitch Lucas. I am the chairman of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council for Charleston County, a group of people that come from all walks of the criminal justice system with the goal of making it better. Last year, the MacArthur Foundation put out a challenge, Public Safety and Justice Challenge. And they used some language that we weren't crazy about till we got a little more used to it, about they wanted to combat the misuse and overuse of jail. When we started thinking about that, we didn't have anything else to offer but jail. So we thought this would be a good opportunity to go after some money to look at this problem a little closer. The first phase of it, everything was very, very quick. The announcement came out in January. We had to have March, have the package in March. 191 sites applied, 20 got selected and got $150,000 and a chance to move on to phase 2. Of those 20, 10 are going to get grants over a 3-year period of multi-million dollars. I'll give you up front, we're going to hopefully secure $3.4 million in this grant. And it's going to cover a lot of things. It's going to be very difficult to understand all of it, but hopefully we'll get through it. Let's go ahead and do that one, Christy, and that one. Now this is a picture of not a group of criminals that gathered up. Although the one on the end on this side may be. These are the representatives on the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. They're from all aspects of the criminal justice system and beyond. We've also got mental health, DAODAS, several other folks are represented in there to make it clear that this is not a criminal justice, a law enforcement issue or a court issue. This is a problem that affects the entire criminal justice system. These are this 3-year transformation plan is focused on those issues right there. Community relations, consistency, and this is a huge one, consistency in making decisions, especially for law enforcement officers on the street. Hopefully have some positive action on a positive effect on the recidivism that occurs at the county level, and focusing on efficiency and effectiveness of the system. But I've got to tell you, some of these things we wanted to do where we can measure and hopefully get better. But some of the things we're doing here, we made a decision early on to do it because it was the right thing to do. It's not more efficient necessarily or not more effective, but it's the right thing to do. And hopefully everything comes out in the wash at the end. We have 6 strategies. I'm going to talk about the first one, then we're going to, first 2, I think, and then hand the ball off to a couple other folks. Right now, we've already implemented this on a very small scale, I think. We're going to, excuse me, develop, excuse me again, develop a uniform approach to police officers' interaction with someone that may end up being arrested, and give them opportunities to find other places and opportunities to, instead of taking them to jail, to cite and release them instead of taking them to jail. We've started this, all of the major agencies that are a part of this began doing this with simple possession cases. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody that gets stopped for simple possession is going to get a ticket and hardy-ho down the road. It means that that's an option for the law enforcement officer on the scene to make that before we never thought like that. And there's a couple of other public intoxication, trespassing, a few other ones that there are more than that, but those are a few that we might use in this particular aspect of the challenge. Triage Center. The twins are up.
Good afternoon. I'm Debbie Blaylock. I'm the director of the Charleston Dorchester Mental Health Center.
Hi, I'm Chanda Brown. I'm the director of the Charleston Center, which is Charleston County's Department of Alcohol and Other Drug Abuse Services.
And we are the co-vice chairs of the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. And the strategy that we own is the strategy to create a triage center to help officers have an alternative versus taking a low-level offender to the detention center. So we recognize that officers need options. They have to have some place to take folks versus the detention center. And when we looked at the data, we recognized that there were 631 individuals who consumed an average of 62 bed days a year at the detention center. So we want to create this option for officers to give them a place to call in and find out what options are available in the community to serve these folks better than being put in the detention center.
We got some information for the strategy through focus groups with law officers as well as chronic offenders that were already in the detention center. And some of the results from that focus group were, one, officers wanted alternatives to jailing, and the chronic offenders wanted resources for the community such as mental health services, substance abuse services, housing, and employment. And so through this triage center, we're going to work on establishing resources for officers, which will provide them options to provide services to these chronic offenders. And we're also going to be collaborating with community agencies to get them linked up with the services that they need.
Any questions for them? If you don't, you can ask later too. I just wanted, while he's up here. Judge?
Hi, I'm Ellen Steinberg, Chief Magistrate for Charleston County. I want to talk to you about strategy number 3, which is court reminders. It's simple. We get phone calls and text messages to remind us when we need to go to the dentist, when we need to go to the hairdresser. Why not for when we need to go to court? Criminal bench warrants are issued for failure to appear. And we have found through the studies that there's a disproportionate number of the black population that's arrested over white. It's a 1 to 5 disproportionality. If we can send reminders, alerts through a text, through a phone call, to the person reminding him or her of court, to the mother, to the grandmother, to the significant other, we believe it's going to make a huge impact on the number of bench warrants issued. When we talk about bench warrants being issued, it's not only for the person who that bench warrant's being issued for. You have victims and witnesses who come to court ready to go to trial, can't go forward. You have the court, you have the officers. The impact is huge across the board. So we're really looking forward to reducing the numbers. We're actually looking to reduce it by 30% by calendar year 2018. It's huge, but we believe we can do it because there's history. This is a program that goes on across the country. We're ready to bring it into Charleston. We're delighted to. The next strategy that I want to talk to you about is pretrial risk assessments. This is something that as bond judges we're paying a lot of attention to now. The data tells us that the length of stay pending trial is a significant jail driver. What that means is the length of stay for a summary court person who's in jail is about 3.5 days. For general sessions, the median time to disposition is 191 days. Think of the impact of people who stay in jail. So we ask ourselves as judges, is this process working? Are we doing a good job of really looking who's high risk, who's low risk? What can we do better? What we can do better is we can level the playing field. We can do what's called a pre-trial risk assessment, so that every single person who is arrested before a bond hearing will meet with a person and go through the same list of questions. How long have you been in this community? What is your prior background? Do you have a job? Where do you work? How long have you worked there? Decisions will be made by bond judges that will be based on really objective criteria. It levels the playing field because if someone's arrested who is going to be a risk to the community, but they can afford a substantial surety bond, a money bond, that's going to make a huge difference from someone who's arrested and cannot afford a money bond. The goal is to increase non-financial bonds by at least 10% in General Sessions Court and 15% in summary courts. What we're looking to do is truly maximize public safety, maximize court appearance. And we're hoping for this grant because it's going to make a tremendous difference in our community. Thank you.
I'm Scarlett Wilson. I'm the solicitor here, the chief prosecutor, and I want to touch on a couple of points that I don't think have been addressed yet. If you don't remember anything else about what we're talking about, it's important for law enforcement and for prosecutors that you remember we are not talking about violent offenders. We are talking about reducing the jail population for non-violent offenders, people who are more likely a danger to themselves or a risk to themselves than they are a risk to somebody else. People who are more likely to be not involved in the criminal justice system at all, but for addiction, poverty, things like that. So when we talk about these strategies and this overuse of the jail, everyone here and everyone involved in this program recognizes that dangerous people need to be incarcerated. So please make sure that you have that straight. The other thing that I want to point out to you is that I think it's clear to this community, and certainly I know that 2015 was a rough year for this community. But what we're doing here is not a reaction to some of the cases that have happened in the past year. As Mitch mentioned, we started this process and we started learning about these opportunities in January of last year, well before some of the high-profile cases that have developed. And I think it took an enormous amount of courage for Sheriff Cannon, for Chief Ritchie, Chief Driggers, Chief Mullen, to not knowing what the outcome of all of this data analysis, not knowing what the outcome would be, but to be willing to look deep in the weeds as to what was going on in their departments. And also for my office to look into the weeds as to what was happening with prosecution. We are just beginning that process. Hopefully this grant is going to help us be able to bring data together more readily so that we can do even more work. Because right now we each have different systems. They don't talk to each other as well as they should, so it makes it difficult for us to look and analyze these things the way that we'd like to. So that's one of our hopes in going for this grant. One of the things that people have questions about or don't understand so often in general sessions prosecution is, why does it take so long? Now, one of the big answers to that is just simple math. When we have 50 or so weeks of court and we've have thousands of cases, you just can't move that many cases in a term of court. But there are things that we can do to help work around the edges to reduce the time that it takes for a case from arrest to disposition. And that's one of the things that we're looking at. The technology that I mentioned in helping our agencies analyze data will also help us share information, cut down in delays in discovery. Discovery is the meat of the case that law enforcement provides to prosecutors, and prosecutors provide to defense and defense lawyers so that they can make assessments and cases can get ready for trial. If we can cut down on those times and make more meaningful the court appearances that we do have, reduce the bench warrants, we can move cases faster. One of the key ways that we can do this, one of the things that we are most proud and pleased about, is that we have the full commitment and support of the Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court and the entire Supreme Court. As you may recall, Chief Justice Peconis will be retiring at the end of this year. He pledged 100% support and is actually an ex officio member of the CJCC. But before just leaving it at that, he went and garnered the support of the other associate justices to ensure continuity. The reason that matters is because you may recall about 3.5 years ago, there was a court opinion that came out that basically took away some of prosecutors' muscles, some of their discretion in moving cases, in controlling the docket. And while most solicitors today agree with the notion that it's better for a court to run a docket, since that opinion came out, we've got nothing. nothing by way of resources for the courts to actually administer dockets, nothing by way of rules and procedures for courts to actually take this on. By having the Chief Justice and the Supreme Court's buy-in with this, and hopefully by securing the resources from this grant, what we can do is provide a model for the state to show when courts have resources and when they can roll up their sleeves and be involved in the administration of a docket, it can move more efficiently, but it takes resources to do it. And hopefully we can be a model for the rest of the state with the securing of these resources, with the involvement and authority of a chief admin judge. Right now, chief administrative judges still, despite the Langford case, are appointed for 6 months at a time. Sometimes it stretches out to a year. What the Chief Justice has committed to is allowing the appointment for a chief administrative judge for 3 years. And what that does is give continuity, it gives buy-in, it gives knowledge across a caseload of the chief admin judge and their staff. So we think that this can have a dramatic effect to make our first and second appearances more meaningful and to reduce the in-custody days before disposition by 37%. That's going to be a tall order for us, but I think with the court's buy-in and with their commitment and continuity, we have a good opportunity to do that. What that also will do will be not only affect those who haven't been able to make bond, who are in jail, it'll affect the cases that are out of jail, which can affect victims, can affect witnesses, can affect law enforcement. It can streamline our system and bring our time to disposition down, which again is one of the main problems that we have in our current system and the way it works now. And I'd be happy to answer any questions about that now or at the end.
Why don't you talk about the number? You haven't given me real numbers. You've got the-
Well, as I said, we want to reduce the time to disposition by 37%. As of now, we're looking at 191 days is the median time that it takes for someone who's in custody to have their case resolved. Our goal is to reduce that to 120, and then for out of custody, reduce from 350 to 220. You know, again, having the court's involvement and supervision, direct supervision in ways that we have not been able to have because of the resources. It's not that the courts don't want to follow Langford, it's that they don't have the resources to man these things, and we think that this can help. The other aspects, as I mentioned, is the improvement of discovery. That's going to be a huge thing. The bench warrant process, although that affects magistrate court a whole lot, it will have a dramatic effect on General Sessions Court as well.
Can you briefly talk about the timeline for that 37%? Is there a goal date in mind?
It's it's over the 3 years, and I think we'll have the timeline that shows you the implementation. The implementation of Strategy 5 will start later in 2016, early 2017. One of the reasons for that is because our court schedules are already planned for the first part of this year. Anything else?
I wanted to also, he's not here, but he's been one of the most ardent supporters of this, and that's the public defender, Ashley Pennington. And he actually made the trip to Columbia, along with the solicitor, to talk to the Chief Justice about supporting this initiative. And last but not least, we have a data warehouse expert that is coming in. And for God's sakes, tell them what REGR means before I say up.
Hi, I'm Christy Danford. I'm the project director for the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. And as you can imagine, the amount of data that we had to cobble together from system entry through the bond process, through court, all the way to case resolution was an enormous effort. And I really give so much credit to the leaders standing behind me who took the time and the willingness to share that data and look at it in a way we'd never looked at it before. Trying to do that took hundreds of manpower hours. It should not be that challenging, nor should it take that long. Strategy 6 is all about that. It's trying to move us away from what was an overly challenging process into something that's going to be more efficient and move it forward in a feasible, logical, and economical way, building on what we already have. So strategy 6 is to develop a centralized data warehouse that will allow us to share particular pieces of information, and also for an end user perspective, as well as to do some continual analysis on how we're doing. So we know if it's working and we can make mid-course corrections if it's not.
Will that data analysis, will that be just subject to your departments, be shared between departments, or is that open public? How will that be utilized?
There's going to be regular reporting that goes on. I'll let these folks talk about how they're going to go with that. But this information is really, if we don't watch it, we don't have the numbers, we won't know if it's working. It's about having what's going well and looks like we're in the green, what's yellow and needs addressing, and what's red where we need to make a quick intervention. And REGOR, because he did ask me to explain, when we're looking at the data, we looked at it in terms of disproportionality. And with REGOR, it'll allow us to have more information to look across similarly situated folks to figure out whether or not there is disparity so that we can address it. And REGOR is just an acronym we use for race, ethnicity, gender, geography, offense, and risk. And it allows us to make those apples-to-apples comparisons. Good.
The main apples-to-apples comparison and this is my favorite part of the plan, besides having a Chief Justice as an ex officio member of the council. Typically, we hear these wide ranges of 20% more African Americans are arrested than the same number of whites. Well, if you're counting the people that live behind gated communities, their possibility of interacting with us in any manner is pretty small. But in other demographics and socioeconomic communities, there's much more opportunity for us to interact with them. So what REGOR is going to do is, instead of taking the entire population of any particular group, we find groups that are alike and compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges. And with that, I'm going to ask any of the elected officials, well, I only got one of a couple elected officials back here. But let me say this real quick before anyone comes up here. One of the questions that somebody's going to ask is, what if you don't get this grant? See, she's a Lucas. Well, if we don't get the grant, we're going to keep charging full speed ahead. Some of these things, like the uniform manner in which the decision to arrest is made, we can do. We can cite and release. We can look at the data. We can try to provide more information to bond setting judges, not enough as we would have with screeners, but we're going to keep going through this. Rusty, would you put the positions that will come along with this? These are all positions that will come into play with this effort. That's where the $3.4 million is going. Most of it is going for personnel. Now, at the end of 3 years, what happens? Well, hopefully, if we've reduced the population of the jail significantly and made a different approach to the criminal justice system here, then we can shift some funding around. And hopefully that's how this is going to play out. But I've got to tell you, we've had, and the police chief and the sheriff and the solicitor have all been tremendous for this, but county council has been present just about every meeting in the form of Judge Vic Rawl, and Colleen Condon has now become a member of the council as well. So unless you've got questions about the strategy specifically or anything else, I'm going to see if anybody back here wants to say anything. Sure.
I think there are a couple things that I would like to emphasize. One is, and I was trying to remember earlier, I think the first efforts that I was involved in a criminal justice coordinating council effort was back in the mid-'80s. But we have never had, in all of its various iterations, the broad expanse of participation from the greater community beyond just the criminal justice system. We recognize that this issue of who's in jail, why, and are there options and alternatives for some of those inmates, is a community issue. And that's one of the reasons that the MacArthur Foundation, which I think this is their first venture into the justice system, is offered this challenge and grant opportunity, is that they recognize that it's a community wide issue. So we've had some tremendous participation from all sorts of groups and individuals that have really added a level of creativity and a perspective that was missing from many of these earlier efforts. I would like to recognize Judge Rawl for his steadfast participation as a member of council. He's been a crucial member of this effort and provides continuity in terms of where do we go from here, whether or not we get the grant. He is someone that has a history, very rich in experience in the criminal justice system. He knows the ins and outs, and he's been able to provide great input, and I think will champion the kinds of thought processes and efforts that we've identified here with the rest of council and his counterparts in the municipal government. Tremendous participation, many meetings, a lot of discussions. I'd like to emphasize the point Christy made, the participation of the police agencies to a certain extent, not knowing what some of the data might show and concerned how that might be interpreted. They've participated and they've come to recognize that in the final analysis, and I'll leave it with this, this initiative provides police officers who have responsibilities, have duties, they have authority, they have a tremendous amount of discretion. Oftentimes what has been lacking are alternatives and options to incarceration. Mitch made the observation about doing things because they're the right things to do. The community ought to have the kind of center that Ms. Blaylock, Ms. Brown talked about in terms of having a place that addresses the real issues that some of the people we encounter out there are having, and it presents a greater potential for some meaningful treatment and addressing issues that are personal and difficult for them, that historically has resulted in them being arrested and put in jail. So we're really excited about this. I think it offers tremendous potential for the greater community and how we police. It has, because I think of some of the relationships that have been strengthened, in some instances created, but strengthened certainly as a result of this effort, will have long-term impact on our community and the justice system. So we're really excited about this and looking forward to the decision that, and think that we're very competitive. I doubt seriously if there are many programs being looked at that will have the level of support that we have had from this diverse part of the community, as well as the Chief Justice and the support of the other associates of the South Carolina Supreme Court. So I think we're very competitive and looking forward to hearing from the final decisions that are made with respect to these last 10 programs. Thank you, and we'll certainly answer any questions that you might have for anybody in particular. You've got something else?
Let me jump in, and two things I didn't explain. One, May is when we find out how we did. The other is, we met with some community leaders at 1 o'clock and went over this and invited them to come in here. We have worked with a group of community activists and community leaders all along with this to help us figure out what we should be doing. Well, we didn't bring them into this process because we were moving too fast. We had to get to where we got a submittal. Well, after this, they get a full seat at the table. It won't just be law enforcement and other members of criminal justice on this. It's going to be the NAACP, the Hispanic community, any of them that want to participate, we'll find a way to make them a part of that. Have you got any questions for any of these folks back here?
Where's the grant money coming from?
The John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation. Did I get it right? Apparently there's another MacArthur Foundation. What else you got?
And do you mind clarifying again, if the phase one of the money that you've already secured, what that's primarily focused on?
Sure. We got $150,000, and it was mainly used on her. The largest chunk of it was to hire a project director, and I think this is another important detail. She doesn't work for the sheriff's office. She has an office there. We handle the infrastructure for it. She works for the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. And everybody that comes along, like I said, we got a special place, like people that work at the solicitor's office are going to work for the solicitor. But we have some other positions that are going to be working for the CJCC. Yeah?
You mentioned that hundreds of hours have gone into this so far. Do you remember a date when you guys first started piecing this together?
We were awarded in May. I came on board in June. It's been nonstop since.
We started in January to become part of phase one. And that's the 191 agencies submitted and 20 were selected.
Christie, you were talking to me in December of 2014.
Yeah, everybody was doing it. Judge Ross went and referred Christie to us. So he got a finder's fee out of that money too.
And I don't make that much money. The rest of the money went to the pilot of the central data warehouse. We knew there was going to be some data issues, so some of that money was set aside to assist with the data.
But the point being, it's $150,000. $3.4 million is mainly going to personnel costs that we need that we don't have. And if we don't get the grant, those will be the most difficult things for us to. Go ahead, Jeff.
Let me just throw out a couple of things that really have not been said. Al and I are probably the two that have been involved in criminal justice systems longer than anybody in the room. I don't know anybody else. Maybe, maybe not.
They're wrong. It's like $115 million.
Was he a prosecutor in 1976?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, I was. In all sincerity, there's a huge difference. Some of us have been through different types of systems like this before. Criminal sentencing, prison overcrowding from 1976 forward. There is a huge difference in this effort. Unlike having a project given to you and said, go sell it, either knock people out, reduce sentencing procedure, do something else. The difference here is that we as a community with a broad base, competitive bunch of folk, not just the individuals, but of course their agencies, have banded together to go after a grant to achieve something that we all agree should be achieved. Now, that's a different chicken and egg scenario than we have been used to in the past. And I don't mind telling you, I know a lot of folks have worn a lot of different hats, maybe me more than most, but suffice it to say, the exciting thing is we are driving the train as to what we want to do within their parameters to improve our community, policing, jail, family services, alcohol and substance abuse services, mental health services, across the board. And that's what's different, and that's what's exciting. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Thank you very much. Yes,
Mayor,
ma'am.
I think you, Sheriff Kennedy, you mentioned that there's been, I guess, an issue in the past in finding alternatives to incarceration, and that's the whole point here is to kind of push the citations and the ticketing instead. I guess if you all have you all taken the time since you first started pursuing this to kind of start doing that already, to start pushing for those citations?
Well, we are fortunate in having some resources that many communities don't have. One is a mobile crisis unit. We have the Medical University of South Carolina here and the Institute of Psychiatry. So we have some options, mental health department, that a lot of communities don't have. But it still has been, and we've been creative. We've tried to look at drug courts and mental health courts and veterans courts. But there have not been real options at 2 o'clock in the morning when the police officer is dealing with someone out on the streets. There are symptoms beyond the issue of who's in jail, the issue with the tent cities, that's related. Homelessness, mental health, it's a tremendous challenge for law enforcement and the larger community in many places around the country. Hardly pick up the news without seeing some reference to that issue and the challenge. The Super Bowl, for example, there were stories about what San Francisco did with their homeless to get them out of the way in advance of the Super Bowl. It's just a problem everywhere, and this is one element of it. And it's in looking at this, if we can create that center that provides the kind of option that as historically in terms of dealing with mental health substance abuse, they've moved away to a certain extent from institutionalized programs to community-based programs, and the funding is not always followed, and they've not always created the kinds of community-based services. We know that some substance abuse issues have increased, they've evolved, and so communities are facing all sorts of challenges, and this is a way of addressing, I think, in many ways, the greater issue than just the issue of who's in jail, as important as that is, and as much as that is a part of the initiative here. I think it's going to lead to some really exciting possibilities as it relates to dealing with substance abuse, mental illness, and as we increasingly see a combination of the two.
If I could also make the point that in previous meetings we've had, at the jail we have mental health. I think we've got 5 over there. And so we've got a jail's unit that the only people going there are treated for substance abuse. But mental health is already on the scene. They're part of the jail. They have offices over there and they provide whatever services. They have a psychiatrist through the medical services contract. So, and that's the other part of this. Didn't want to get too deep, but the triage that we were talking about not going to jail, if you get put in jail, the triage is going to go into effect there too. The people in the jail are going to triage you, and then if you come in and you have a mental health illness, mental health issue or day notice, they get started at while they're in jail. So when they come out of jail, they're already involved with the person, or they've continued the care from before they went to jail, through the jail and out. So this is going to make us. I will tell you, I would have never believed that I would see anything of this magnitude in a local criminal justice system in my lifetime. This is a bigger event than I think that we've been able to convey to y'all or to anyone else. But this is really a substantial step in the right direction on so many levels. that we would have never been able to do had the MacArthur Foundation not issued this challenge.
Can you clarify just a little bit further in terms of the triage center? Is it a jail diversion program or is it more of a support program after they've? Can you just clarify?
Let's throw a new word in that I learned from one of my counterparts around the country. It's going to deflect people from the jail and into mental health or day oldest needs that instead of bringing them to the jail. If they come into the jail, we're going to have to do a better job, hopefully, of addressing those needs while they're in jail so that it's not just stay right there until your court date comes up. We work with them while we've done. Does that answer your question?
It does, yeah.
The other piece about the triage center is that it's going to address needs like housing, employment. So a lot of times folks may get arrested because they've been loitering or they've been trespassing. It may have nothing to do with their substance abuse or their mental illness. And they may have those things, but that might not be why they're being arrested. And so this is going to help find housing, help find employment. So it'll deal with social issues beyond the medical issues.
Just adding to what Debbie's saying, the goal of the triage center, which I didn't talk about earlier, is that it's going to help reduce bed days in the detention center. It's going to provide services to those that are in the detention center that are chronic offenders by providing them case management services to help them be more successful when they transition to the community. But it's also going to be an intervention that the officers can use at call-in, pre-booking, and at arrest.
And again, for nonviolent offenders.
Yes.
You know, and that ties into something that I don't think we've pointed out that much. While we all have bought in and believe that the things that we're talking about are the right thing to do, they're also going to save the county a lot of money. And that hasn't been highlighted quite enough. It does feel good to do the right thing. It does feel good to look into these things and be more efficient and more effective into putting people where they need to be. But the fact that it will save Charleston County so much money is a nice thing as well.
And once we get this in place, I hope to be able to accurately forecast what those savings will be. We've stayed away from that now because we just don't know. You know, we don't know if we get the money or not. Well, we're going to get the money. But you know how it will place. We're expecting that the county is going to continue to support this, and possibly municipalities too, depending on how it grows. But it's going to offer, like Sliss said, an opportunity to save an awful lot of money.
Thank you very much for being here.
We got some